Welcome back, everybody, for another edition of Movies That Move We. Today, we are discussing Rustin, as in Bayard Rustin, civil rights leader. I never heard a whole lot about him in school. He wasn't mentioned. As a matter of fact, I know I didn't hear about him until I was a full-grown adult.
I didn't. I feel like in school, we learned mostly about Martin Luther King and, these types of movements that were going on, but we didn't learn about the people behind the scenes that were kind of, really helping to push it.
Or hindering.
Yeah, so cases. It's just kind of I may have heard this name in passing, but it didn't stick because it wasn't so... In the school system, they don't really teach you about the background as much as they teach you about the main leaders, like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X,
Rosa Parks.
Yeah, Harriet Tubman. It's those are the
Robert
main
Kennedy.
Ones.
Yeah, you know.
What you say?
Yeah, because he was the president. No, John
Kennedy.
And Robert.
Yeah,
because president and his brother.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, those are names that you hear thrown around regularly. But Bayard Rustin, I feel like only recently have they started talking about his role in the civil rights movement. This movie, which you can watch on Netflix, doesn't cover his entire life. It just covers starting with just before the civil rights movement, where he's trying to push the NAACP to do more, to be visible, to go national. And it's met with resistance because other members really I don't think it's not that they didn't take him seriously, because up until that point he proved valuable as an organizer. But the one thing that kind of held people back from being too engaged with him was his homosexuality. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what this whole film covers. Coleman Domingo played Rustin. And if I never knew who Rustin was before, I would believe that's exactly how Rustin acted.
Yeah, he did a really good job with the voice, the body, the body language and the mannerisms. Yeah, he did a really good job with that.
I'm still wondering how they did that too.
That too, because I was sitting here usually in films, if somebody's missing a tooth, they'll color it black. But it looked like it was legit missing.
Now, I've heard of some people who are so committed to the role that they'll go ahead and get a tooth removed for the cause. So I don't know if he did that. I haven't heard.
Or maybe they did some type of altering with a computer system or something to make it look like that.
Maybe, because where that tooth was knocked out, you could see through it to the other side of his mouth. But anyway, that aside, other folks who were in this movie, it was a good cast. Mm-hmm. It was a really good cast.
The girl from Black Cake was in there. The one that played the daughter.
Yes.
She was the pastor's wife.
Yeah, I don't know her name. I didn't jot her name down. But she was in there, and the pastor that she's talking about is Elias Taylor. He was, in the film, was one of Bayard's love interests. And as she pointed out, he was a pastor, and he was married. This is not a real person, not a real point in his life. Elias, as well as Tom, these were two of the characters who were not real. I think Tom may have represented a lover at that time, but these were just figures meant to tie in the story of how his homosexuality impacted the way he was able to move through the movement. Mm-hmm. But some other people that were in there, Glenn Turman played A. Philip Randolph, Jeffrey Wright, which we'll be talking about him next week. Jeffrey Wright played Adam Clayton Powell. Chris Rock played Roy Wilkins, and oh my God, he played that role. Mm-hmm. He was mean. He was mean.
He really did play that role.
Audra McDonald, another one that I love. She played Ella Baker. AML Amin, which I think he's on Fresh Prince.
Honestly, he was a face that I didn't really recognize out of anything else.
Yeah.
But you talking about the new one?
The new one.
Yeah, I didn't watch that.
Yeah, I didn't. I started watching it and then got sidetracked. He played Martin Luther King.
I wasn't feeling him in that role.
So here's how I feel about it. He wasn't given full Martin. He wasn't given full Martin, but there was an essence there that it worked for me. It worked. But as I thought about it, I'm like, there are very few people that I can think of that have really done Martin, and they've gone all over the map as far as people who have played. They went light skin, dark skin, heavy set, too thin. They've done it all as far as casting Martin characters. I think he did all right.
Yeah, I think he did okay, especially with him not being like the main centerpiece of it.
Well, the thing is, he also didn't have anything where he had to stand behind a podium and...
Well, the end part he did.
The end part, but that throughout, you didn't see him doing various speeches. But again, it wasn't about him.
I was also, I know this is going off topic a little bit, but I was kind of disappointed that maybe I'm thinking about the wrong speech. But I did a report and my mom made me stay up and do this report like really late at night because she was mad at me because I didn't get it done till the last minute. But I did a report on Marian Anderson? Yeah. But she wasn't in there.
No, she wouldn't be. You're thinking of Mahalia Jackson, and
Mahalia Jackson, I remember, but didn't she do something with Martin Luther King?
She had a role, but I don't think it was here. It wasn't with the march.
I thought she was at the march because I remember she sang and it was like in front of a bunch of people like that.
She sang at Carnegie Hall. She was the first black woman to sing at Carnegie Hall. There's a scene where Bayard comes back. There was a rift between Martin and Bayard, where Bayard actually was trying, like I said at the beginning, was trying to convince the NAACP to do more, and he took a gamble on his friendship. He said, you know what, I'm going to go in there and tender my resignation, and Martin is going to stand by me. And he walked in there, tendered his resignation, and everybody in the room, including Martin, said, we accept. And that was due in part to the fact that he's homosexual, and just that alone was enough to kind of sidetrack.
Well, it was also like it was the rumors too, because at that time they were trying to say that basically like because him and Martin were so close that they were having a relationship, which wasn't the case. But you know, Rustin was, and in the beginning of the film they show that like they're super close, where like he's asking how Coretta's doing, he's asking how the kids are doing, so it's like
uncle.
Yeah, so it's like they had this very close kind of family type relationship. So with people already being uncomfortable with the fact that this man is homosexual, they're automatically going to assume anybody that he is in contact with for like a close relationship like that anyway, or some type of friendship, they're automatically going to assume, oh, there's something going on or whatever, because that's just how people are.
Right.
So,
well, at that time, being gay was illegal. You could get arrested. Yeah, you could lose everything if people found out you were homosexual, you were gay, lesbian, whatever. So throughout the movie, he's constantly balancing that. He and Martin didn't talk for a period of time. He was working for CORE, which is the Congress of Racial Equality and Jobs for Freedom. So to be clear, that was the march that he was working on. He was now an organizer for CORE, not the NAACP. And CORE was made up of a lot of younger people, because that's the civil rights movement. Even though there were some elders at the helm who said, hey, we got to do something different, the young people, college age down to little kids, were put in the forefront. And so he started organizing. He brainstormed with his team and he said, we'll do a 2-day march. We'll do a 2-day march, and we're going to take over Washington. We're going to have a whole speech and everything going. Day 1, day 2, we're surrounding the White House, and they're going to know that we're there. And it got up the line. He went ahead, organized, got in front of what he thought was Parks and Recreation to meet with them and get all the logistics, and he was met with the police. Now, here's where things get hairy, because it wasn't just government officials who heard about this, intercepted, and said, there's no way we're going to let all these black people come and march on this property. It's dangerous. People are afraid. People are afraid, as in white people are afraid. So they said, you're not going to come out here for 2 days. You're coming out here for 1. And Rustin asked, he said, now, you're not the boss of me, so who did you talk to? And they mentioned Roy Wilkins, and he was like, well, I don't work for him, and I didn't come here to meet you. So how are we going to get this done? And he was like, I already told you how you're getting it done. You're getting it done in 1 day. Period. So when I say that there was a constant working against from CIA, Hoover, and even internally with members of SNCC and the NAACP, he was fighting on all fronts to move this thing forward. Of course, we know that it was a success. He got it done, but there were a lot of moving parts to it. By the end of everything, we've learned it and have known it as the March on Washington that the NAACP put forth. But like I said, it was core. At a certain point, the NAACP came up and said, listen, we don't have the numbers. We don't have the people that we need there. So somebody said, we can go ahead. They're going to be at their auntie and them's having a barbecue. They can spread it word of mouth, but they're spreading it as NAACP. So come under our name, because we got brand recognition, and we can promise you that you'll have the numbers. I think at that point they were 3 weeks out. You'll have the numbers you need in 3 weeks, because they'll tell 2 friends and they'll tell 2 friends, and so on and so on and so on. And they were successful. They made it to the finish line. Let's see, what else do we have about him? He was actually the person who introduced Martin Luther King to what is the phrase? Peaceful resistance, peaceful protests. A lot of people, what we learned anyway, you tell me if you learned the same thing, that Martin Luther King studied Mahatma Gandhi and learned that way. Rustin introduced him to that. And let's see, what the most poignant line in the film, and it was kind of a gut punch when he said it, and I believe he was talking to Martin in this scene. He said, on the same day I was born black, I was born gay. And it was like, well, damn, when you put it that way, he's had this struggle the whole time, not just of being black, not just being a black male and having to deal with society's thoughts around that, but then having to hide a part of himself
from even his own people.
And it wasn't necessarily that it was a secret. It was still something that he had to fight in that space. Where we hear his name is when they say, oh, well, you know, he was the organizer of the March on Washington, but they wouldn't let him speak. And he's right there in the front, just standing just behind Martin Luther King. But they wouldn't name him again for the same reasons. So, and one of the other things that was mentioned, was it Ella Baker? No, it wasn't Ella Baker, and I didn't write her name down. Oh, she questioned why women were not allowed to speak.
Oh, yeah. And then that was the other part that I noticed too. It was saying that and I wasn't sure if he was referencing just white women when he said it, but when he went to them again to discuss like how everything was going to go in Washington DC and everything like that, he basically was telling him that, like, he was telling Rustin that it was like one of the officers or whatever was telling Rustin that basically all women have to stay home that day or something, like they couldn't come out.
I didn't recall that.
And then that's when he like addressed him about like, well, why are you making that rule? You know, just because. And he started talking about like how the white cops, they beat on black men and children and they put hoses on them and stuff like that. He was like, you know, are we supposed to have that same type of...
That's right.
And I was just kind of confused as to like, where was he just talking about white women, or was he talking about all women? And I was like, well, why can't the women come out? And
no, he was talking about the black women who were a part of the movement, because they were there.
Yeah.
And they were involved. You know, they were the ones that, you saw the thing where they had usher members, and then they had the women in the back, you know, preparing the food and stuff like that. But these women were behind these men doing what they did. When word of mouth needed to get around, it wasn't just going through the men. The women were the conduits for a lot of this stuff. And there were things that did in fact matter to women, because guess who's raising the kids? All these things that, you know, they were working towards stuff for the future, so that their children, literally, black kids, white kids, will be treated differently. The next generation will be treated differently. So to not have women speaking, they were allowed to introduce, but they were not allowed to speak. It was still, what's the word I'm looking for?
It was still kind of an oppression for women, because it was like...
It was maintaining that standard that, you know, women are supposed to be in the kitchen barefoot and pregnant and waiting for their husbands to come home, kind of thing. And it's like, no, that's not what we're doing. We're all working to get to the same place. We were talking about earlier, because one of the opening scenes was Rustin getting beaten up by the police for sitting at the front of the bus. And they dragged him off. They beat him. They knocked out his tooth. And I told her about the decisions that were made as far as who gets to be the face of what. We never saw Rustin as a face in the bus boycott, because, once again, he was homosexual. They did the same thing with Rosa Parks. She was chosen as the face of the bus boycott. And they had someone else, Claudette Colvin, but they decided not to go with her because she was a teenage mother. Excuse me. And it would be real easy for those in power to come back and say, well, look at her. She doesn't have any morals. She's out here getting pregnant before she's married. You know, she's a drag on society, and this is the person that they pick. Their whole thing is invalid. This is why they need to be segregated, because they're going to destroy decency in America. And so these were a lot of the tough decisions that were made. I don't even know if they were tough at the time, but they were decisions that they made in order to make sure things went smoothly and no one could say, oh, that person's background is questionable. Yeah. So what else did you think?
The other thing that was it stuck out to me, I actually did like just a brief kind of overview of him, like, you know, when he was born, things of that nature. And I didn't realize that he's from Westchester, PA. I
didn't know that either. I found that out.
Yeah, I also didn't realize that. Okay, so, and maybe this is just me being ignorant to the religion itself or whatever, but I didn't know he was, like, I didn't know black people could be Quaker. I thought that was only, like, a white thing.
I didn't know that either. I haven't heard a lot of
I've never heard of a black Quaker. Like, because I've heard that they're very similar to kind of, like, Amish people a little bit. Like, they kind of have the same ideas, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't really...
I haven't done a deep study into Quakers, but my understanding is that during the Emancipation period, that they were some of the people who were on the Underground Railroad. They were abolitionists, so it didn't seem extremely odd to hear that he was a Quaker.
Okay.
Based on that, but again, I haven't known very many Black Quakers, so I really couldn't speak on that. I didn't realize this. Let me say it like this. I started watching it, got sidetracked. There was an intro that Barack Obama did, and I didn't get to watch all of it and couldn't get back to it.
Yeah, because it was like when you click the like to go on Netflix and watch it, he comes up, but then when you're watching the movie, that excerpt's not in there.
Right.
But didn't him and Michelle like co-direct the movie?
They were executive. What is it? Executive producers. Yeah, executive directors on the film, and this is under their film company. So they're actually cranking out a lot of stuff, and I'm loving it because again, it's things that aren't taught, haven't been taught. People are fighting to make sure they are not taught in schools.
Just really hope, because it's like, even with them not, because I even asked my daughter is 6, and I asked her, I said, did you learn anything for Black History Month yet, or did they teach you guys anything? And she said no.
Wow.
So it's just kind of one of those things where I really hope, I mean, as parents, you have to teach your kids this stuff, but I really just hope that as time goes on, especially when she gets older, with them coming out with these films. I remember when I was in high school, even though Martin Luther King and like Malcolm X and Harriet Tubman, they were like the main centerpieces, they still did kind of try to go off into other things, or at least expand on a lot of these different things that they were doing, like the March on Washington, the Black Panthers, things of that nature. They did try to expand on that a little bit. And they usually tried to do that through film. They even did like Emmett Till for us in school and stuff like that. But they did that through film. Like they showed us movies, and then they would be like, okay, as you're watching the movie, pay attention, because all the questions that we give you, we want you to answer them to see if you're basically paying attention to what you're watching. And, I actually really like that in school, and I really hope that with all these new films coming out, like Rustin, what's the other one that we watched with, like, the singer?
Which one? Oh,
was it, with Viola Davis in it?
Yes, it's coming to me. I lost it, but something.
It's called Ma something.
Not Ma Rainey's.
Yeah, I think it was.
Was it Ma Rainey's?
I think it was Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, something like that.
Yeah.
But like films like that, like now that these are kind of coming out on streaming and they're coming out on other channels and stuff like that, I just hope that it's something that they do put more in like middle school, high school, for people to like our kids to do their projects on and stuff like that, so they can learn more about it. Because it's just like, I'm tired of literally... And then George Washington Carver, that's another one. When they talk about great inventors, it's always George Washington Carver. It's always Madam C.J. Walker. And there are so many other things that I've learned not until I was an adult. Even now, I just went to the African American History Museum like a couple weeks ago. And I went in there and I was like, I did not know anything about this. Yeah. And I just hope that's something that kind of gets taught more in schools.
Yeah, but the key is you got to teach it at home, because they didn't teach it this year, maybe next year. The Nugget will start learning about some of this stuff, but they always start with Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and there was a discussion online about this, people are like, don't say move on from those things. And I'm not saying move on from it. I'm saying in addition to teaching those things, teach us about some of the other things. Put that in schools as well. Teach about Rustin, teach about Claudette Colvin.
I feel like it would be cool if, like, they even, like, okay, that was the main centerpiece of the lesson, but, like, and maybe they taught them about, like, the marches and all that other stuff, and maybe, like, the sit-ins, and then at the end of the semester, or the end of the cycle of whatever lesson they're learning, okay, I've come up with a list of all of the organizers, members of the NAACP, important people that were in the civil rights music, musicians that were a part of the civil rights movement. I feel like if they created a list of that and then said, okay, you pick somebody, everybody has to pick somebody, or we're randomly handing out these people, and you have to go home and do a research project and present it to the class. That would be cool. And honestly, that's how we did stuff as kids. Is like, we had to do research projects and present it to our class. Like, that's what we had to do.
The thing is, we are going to have to make sure little Miss learns these things. I know she's got the attention span of a gnat. She's not going to sit down and watch Rustin, but we have to be the ones to introduce our kids, because we can sit here and rely on the schools all day.
Yeah, for sure.
But they don't have an interest in making sure that we are aware of our history. So wherever you can interject it, friends, your kids, your grandkids, make sure they know about people like Bayard Rustin, you know, and what his role was, because there really would be no march if it were not for him. At that point in 1963, the NAACP was still doing small local things, but this march brought everything to attention nationally and further empowered the whole movement. So this is definitely a recommend from us. Again, great cast, great story. I learned more about someone I knew very little about to begin with. So definitely check this one out if you haven't. Get it on your list. Again, it's available on Netflix. So I normally don't do this because from one week to the next is different. But next week we're doing American fiction. So make sure you watch that. That you can download that. That hasn't come anywhere for free streaming, but you can download it on Vudu, Fandango, Apple TV. It may be limited. It may be still showing in theaters. It was a limited release. But if you can get to a theater and see it, definitely do it. You'll love it. Anyway, until next time, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.